Harrison with you on KPFK, and I want to reintroduce you to a man who has done so much over the years in a way that, shall we say, the history books have not been able to do. And I'm talking about some extraordinary audio archives. Now, the history books, as you know, are printed by people who own the printing presses. And then there is audio of stuff that really happened. Real eyewitnesses like Rosa Parks in jail. Where is this audio? Well, it exists in one place in the world, and that, of course, is with the Pacifica Archives here in Los Angeles. I want you to say hello to Brian DeShazor. He is the custodian of all things audio, of all things important. And Brian, you have an event coming up on Monday the 16th.
All right, the 16th and Tuesday the 17th, we are going on our annual National Marathon Fund Drive supporting the preservation and access of this historic collection that is renowned by scholars as one of the most important audio collections in the world. Why do you think that is, Harrison?
Why do I think it's one of the most important audio collections in the world? Well, because this stuff simply doesn't exist anywhere else, and it's probably the only access any of us has to any sort of alternative history. In other words, it's not brought to you by Coca-Cola.
That's exactly what the common denominator in all these recordings are, that sort of span the scope of education. We're sort of launching our campus campaign, Volume 2, on the 16th and 17th, Monday and Tuesday of this coming week. And then what we're doing is taking this collection, and we've been producing a radio series each week for the past 3 years, and we've been working with professors of education that say that it fits the curriculum that they teach in high school and colleges. So on Monday and Tuesday, as we're raising funds to preserve these materials that are deteriorating and will soon be lost if we don't arrest the deterioration and get them digitized, is that we take these and allow the listeners, sponsors, to name a school, and we will send this collection to that school library so that it can be accessible by students and teachers, and it is the alternative history. It's the documentation of the last half of the 20th century as told by the grassroots movement before it was even named, going back to 1949, Harrison, to when public broadcasting was invented, way before the public broadcasting system was created in the 1970s.
Now, you're saying, Brian, that basically what you've got is you're providing in schools where there's basically a very limited curriculum. You know, George Washington rowing the Potomac, Abe Lincoln gnawing on a toothpick, whatever it is. I mean, people have just bits of mythology, and then the rest of it is conspicuously missing. What you're talking about is providing to schools, to the librarians, access to stuff heretofore unknown.
That's right. You know, if you think about also in history books, you really have a paragraph or a page in high school that is the description of the African American civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. What we have in the archive is the entire experience of that movement from Dr. Martin Luther King on down to a woman who simply is in a bar in Chicago in 1966, telling our reporters what it's like to live in Chicago in 1966, 2 years before the Democratic National Convention had riots where Bobby Seale and the entire system of the revolution and the counterculture became upturned. And this is what is documented to no other degree in this Pacifica Archives. And we're giving the opportunity to the listeners to help us find those schools to get it into before it's systematically distributed and made available. This is really a way that we can connect these voices of Rosa Parks. The very first interview after her release from jail in 1956 was here on Pacifica. And how important that single interview is, Carrie Harrison, I used your first name too, is that that recording is so important that because of the preservation project and because listeners previously have donated to us, we've been able to get that recording inside the actual bus, that it's in a museum in Dearborn, Michigan at the Ford Museum, where children get to be filed through the bus and listen to not a male narrator tell the story, but Rosa Parks herself in her own voice at the beginning of what happened to be her becoming an icon of the movement. So it's, in terms of integrity, it's the most pristine interview of Rosa Parks ever recorded. And now it's going to be in the history books. And when we get to history books, then we get into deeper history of what is the historic record. What is the agreed upon history when all scholars start rewriting those history books decade after decade? And what we have is a contribution to the cultural heritage of our country that has only been amassed by listener sponsorship over the past 60 years here on Pacifica Radio. And it really is a treasure and a gift to our country and our future generations that we've been able to not only support the radio stations on a daily basis for 60 years, but we've been able to collect and safeguard these moments in time that otherwise have absolutely been erased from history, or at least not documented to the point where it is history and well known.
Okay, Brian, so on Monday, November 16th, it's a call to action. It's a day where we can all participate and actually create history, or should we say recreate history, and provide some truth in a place where there's been a vacuum. Stuff, you're talking about Che Guevara, interviews with him, stuff that we've never heard, have never had access to, never even knew existed. So what's going to happen all day on Monday, November the 16th?
Well, we'll be playing clips and highlights of some of the most significant recordings and significant speakers and visionary thinkers of the past 60 years so that people can experience that moment in time and then be able to sort of connect the dots of where does the listener think that recording should live? Should it live in your alma mater, high school, or your college, or your son's school, or your daughter's junior high school? We had people even donate and sponsor nonprofit organizations and churches. If you think about a church in Atlanta, Georgia, receiving a collection of speeches and interviews with Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks, then you have sort of like the power of what these recordings can do. Not only tell history, but speak to it. So on that day, we'll be highlighting the significance of this and bringing special guests and special hosts like yourself to make that context, create the context of why a speech by Rachel Carson in 1963, I think it was, before the Women's National Press Club, is so important now to our education and understanding and comprehension of the modern environmental movement. So we're going to have an exciting day of live guests, archival sound, and again, that sort of exciting, enthusiastic thing of how many schools can we sponsor in 2 days on a national broadcast. Last year we did 783 schools. This year I hope we can do more.
Well, Brian DeShazor, thank you so much. And thank you for having parented all of this extraordinary audio, keeping it not only alive, but now finally making it available. So the quick upshot, let's say somebody donates $200. We send this audio off to some school in the middle of Mississippi, maybe a civil rights movement type stuff. So not only does the person who gave the $200 get that 9 hours of audio, but that 9 hours of audio simultaneously ends up in a school system where it then becomes ubiquitously available to not only the entire school, the staff, and I imagine really anybody who lives around there. What a great way to make something available and obvious to people who never even knew it was there to begin with.
Right, but you know what? I have a big correction. It's not 9 hours, it's 90 hours. 90 episodes of an hour program called From the Vault, FromTheVaultRadio.org. And you can also find out more by going to PacificaRadioArchives.org. And you can call us in the archives toll-free nationwide at 1-800-735-0230. It's right behind me there.
Thank you so much, Brian DeShazor. Looking forward to Monday, November the 16th, and we'll see you then. And we're going to have a great time, and we're going to be playing audio that nobody has ever heard before.
Right, and you can also listen online at supportpra.org on those 2 days, the 16th and 17th of November.
Very good. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Harrison.